He was the monster every server prayed they wouldn't get. Kenjiro Tanaka, a billionaire whose temper was more famous than his fortune. Staff at the Azure Orchid would fake illnesses, drop trays, do anything to avoid his table. For years they tiptoed around the dragon, enduring his cold fury and impossible demands in terrified silence. They all knew the rules: never make eye contact, never speak unless spoken to, and never, ever challenge him. Then a new waitress, Simone Jones, started her shift completely unaware of the legend. And when she looked the monster right in the eye and refused to break, she unknowingly lit a fuse that would expose a secret so devastating it would change everything. The Azure Orchid wasn't just a restaurant, it was a theater. Every night, a performance of wealth and status played out under the warm glow of crystal chandeliers. Its patrons were the city's elite, old money scions, tech moguls, and the politicians who courted them. Its staff were seasoned professionals trained to be unobtrusive ghosts who anticipated every need before it was voiced. They moved with a synchronized, silent grace, their faces placid masks of impeccable service. But on Tuesday evenings, a different kind of performance took place, a one-man show of intimidation, and the entire staff became its unwilling, trembling audience. Tuesday was Mr. Tanaka's night. The name was spoken in hushed tones in the kitchen, a verbal curse that seemed to cool the air. He was a titan of the tech and shipping industries, a man who had built a global empire from the ground up. His face, etched with severe lines and framed by steel-gray hair, often graced the covers of business magazines. But in the hushed, carpeted corridors of the Azure Orchid, he wasn't a titan. He was a terror. Stories about him were the restaurant's own grim folklore. There was the tale of the sommelier he'd had fired on the spot for recommending a wine that was, in Tanaka's opinion, presumptuous. There was the young busboy who'd accidentally spilled a single drop of water on the tablecloth and was met with a glare so withering he'd quit mid-shift. The fear was primal. When his polished black Lexus would pull up to the curb, a wave of silent panic would ripple through the establishment. The host, Martin, a man who prided himself on his unflappable demeanor, would visibly pale. Senior waiters would suddenly find urgent tasks in the wine cellar. Junior staff would become intensely interested in polishing already gleaming silverware in the back. The unenviable task of serving him fell to whoever drew the short straw, a grim ritual overseen by the floor manager, Mr. Davies. Into this den of carefully managed anxiety walked Simone Jones. Simone was new, not just to the Azure Orchid, but to this level of dining. She was 24, with warm, intelligent eyes that held a fire of determination. Her life had been a series of hard knocks and side steps. She was working 2 jobs to put her younger sister, Nia, through community college while also helping to manage the growing pile of medical bills for their mother, who was battling a chronic illness. For Simone, this job wasn't about prestige, it was about survival. It paid better than any place she'd ever worked, and she was determined to excel, to become one of those seamless, professional ghosts. She'd spent her first week in a daze of learning, memorizing the dizzying wine list, the precise placement of 7 different forks, and the subtle social cues of the fabulously wealthy. She hadn't yet been indoctrinated into the cult of fear surrounding Kenjiro Tanaka. Her training had focused on menus and protocol, not the psychological profiles of problem patrons. On her second Tuesday, the short straw was metaphorically handed to her. The designated waiter for Tanaka's usual corner booth, a secluded alcove offering privacy and a panoramic view of the city, had called in sick with a sudden, violent stomach flu that everyone knew was a diplomatic fiction. Mr. Davies, his face tight with stress, scanned the floor. His eyes, desperate, landed on Simone. She was polishing glasses behind the bar, her movements quick and efficient. "Jones," Davies said, his voice low and urgent. "You're up." "Up for what, Mr. Davies?" she asked, setting a crystal flute down with care. "Table 7. Mr. Tanaka." The name meant nothing to her. "Okay. Any allergies or preferences I should know about?" A nervous laugh escaped a nearby waiter, which he quickly stifled into a cough when Davies shot him a death glare. "Just be perfect," Davies whispered, his eyes wide. "Don't make conversation. Don't offer suggestions unless he asks. Be quick, be quiet, and disappear. Do you understand?" The intensity of the warning was strange, but Simone simply nodded. She'd dealt with difficult customers before. How bad could one man be? She straightened her black apron, took a deep breath, and grabbed a leather-bound menu. As she approached table 7, she felt the ambient energy of the dining room shift. It was as if 100 conversations had simultaneously lowered in volume. The other servers moved with a new, stilted caution, their eyes darting towards her, then away like frightened birds. He was already seated, staring out the vast window at the glittering city below. He didn't look up as she approached. He was a man built on an imposing scale, his bespoke navy suit fitting his broad shoulders perfectly. A half-empty glass of what looked like whiskey sat by his hand. "Good evening, sir," Simone said, her voice clear and steady. "Welcome to the Azure Orchid. May I present you with the menu?" Kenjiro Tanaka turned his head slowly. His eyes, a startlingly dark, piercing brown, scanned her from head to toe. It wasn't a leer, it was an appraisal, cold and dismissive, as if he were inspecting a piece of furniture for flaws. He said nothing. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Simone held his gaze, refusing to be the first to look away. She'd been taught that direct eye contact was a sign of confidence and sincerity. Davy's warning echoed in her head, but instinct took over. Cowering felt like a form of dishonesty. Finally, with a soft grunt, he gestured curtly at the table. "Leave it." Simone placed the menu down. "Can I get you another whiskey while you decide?" He picked up his glass, swirled the amber liquid, and took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're new," he stated. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. My second week." "They're letting novices handle this table now," he mused, a subtle, cutting disdain in his tone. "Standards must be slipping." Simone felt a flash of heat rise in her cheeks, but she suppressed it. She thought of her mother's prescription costs. She thought of Nia's tuition payment, due next month. She could not afford to fail. "I'm fully trained on the menu, sir," she replied, her tone even and professional, "and I can assure you, the only thing slipping will be the butter on your complimentary bread roll, should you desire one." The silence that followed was absolute. Simone's heart hammered against her ribs. She thought she'd be fired on the spot. She could feel Davy's horror from across the room without even looking. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Maria, a veteran waitress, press a hand to her mouth. Tanaka's severe face didn't change, but a flicker of something, surprise, annoyance, passed through his cold eyes. He stared at her for a long moment, then let out another low grunt, this one sounding less like a dismissal and more like a reluctant acknowledgement. "Filet mignon. Medium rare. More rare than medium. If it comes out with even a hint of pink in the center, I'm sending it back. The sauce on the side, not drizzled, not in a little puddle next to it. In a separate bowl. And a bottle of the 89 Montrachet." He didn't even glance at the wine list. He knew what he wanted. He knew it was one of the most expensive bottles they had. It was a power move, a test. "An excellent choice, sir," Simone said, her voice betraying none of her inner turmoil. She wrote down the order, her hand steady. "I'll put that in immediately." She turned and walked away, her back straight, her steps measured. She didn't run. She didn't look relieved. As she passed the bar, Maria grabbed her arm, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. "Are you insane?" Maria hissed. "You talk back to him." "Nobody talks back to him." "I didn't talk back," Simone corrected quietly, pulling her arm free. "I did my job. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go and make sure the chef understands the concept of more rare than medium." The staff of the Azure Orchid had just witnessed the unthinkable. A new waitress had stood her ground against Kenjiro Tanaka, and for the first time in a very long time, no one knew what was going to happen next. The script had been thrown out, and the theater of the Azure Orchid had suddenly become very real. The kitchen was a pressure cooker of controlled chaos, but when Simone pushed through the swinging doors, the usual clatter of pans and shouted orders seemed to momentarily hush. The head chef, Julian, a temperamental genius who feared no man except, it seemed, the one at table 7, looked up from plating a delicate sea bass. "The order for Tanaka," Simone announced, handing him the slip. She leaned in closer. "Chef, he was very specific about the steak. He said medium rare, but more rare than medium. He also said he'd send it back if it's even a hint of pink." Julian snatched the paper, his brow furrowed. "More rare than medium, but not pink? Does he want me to cook it with a stern look? What is this nonsense?" "And the sauce in a separate bowl, completely detached from the plate," Simone added. Julian grumbled, running a hand through his flour-dusted hair. "This man. Every week, a new psychological game. Fine. I will sear it for 45 seconds on each side and wave it in the general direction of the oven. If he complains, you tell him it was cooked with quantum mechanics. He then barked at a line cook, get the Montrachet from the deep cellar, and handle it like it's a newborn baby's heart." Simone retreated from the kitchen's heat but was intercepted by Maria, who pulled her into the small, cramped staff locker room. Mr. Davies was there too, pacing the tiny space like a caged animal. He had loosened his tie, and a sheen of sweat glistened on his forehead. "What in God's name were you thinking, Jones?" Davies began, stopping his pacing to face her. "I told you, be quiet, be invisible. The only thing slipping will be the butter on your complimentary bread roll. Are you trying to get fired?" He was being rude, Mr. Davies, Simone said, her own defensiveness rising. "He implied I was incompetent and that your standards were dropping. I simply corrected him politely." "Politely?" Maria cut in, her arms crossed. "Simone, you don't understand. This isn't a normal customer. This is Kenjiro Tanaka. He doesn't operate on a normal human level. He doesn't do polite, he does power. He's a shark. You don't correct a shark, you just hope it doesn't bite you." Davies sank onto a small bench, rubbing his temples. "Maria's right. Let me give you the full picture. 2 years ago, Tanaka came in. A young waiter, Thomas, was serving him. Tanaka claimed his soup was cold. It wasn't. Thomas, trying to be helpful, said, 'I can assure you, sir, it came right from the pot.' A simple, innocent sentence. Davies looked up, his eyes grave. Blackwood made one phone call. The next day, Thomas's father, a department manager at a mid-level supply company, was laid off. The company had just lost its biggest contract, a subsidiary of Tanaka Industries. We never proved it, of course. But we all knew. The man is vindictive. He has the power to ruin lives over a bowl of soup." Simone felt a chill go down her spine. This was more than just a grumpy rich man. This was something darker. "Why?" Simone asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why is he like that?" Maria sighed, her hardened expression softening for a moment. "The story goes, it wasn't always this way. Years ago, he was different. Happily married, had a little girl. Then there was an accident. A drunk driver ran a red light, killed them both instantly. His wife, Okami, and his daughter, Hannah. She was only 6 inches. The air in the small room grew heavy with the weight of the tragedy. Simone thought of her own family, the fierce, protective love she felt for her mother and sister. The guy who did it, Maria continued, her voice low, had money, good lawyers. He got off with a slap on the wrist. Community service. They said Tanaka changed after that. The man who went into that courthouse was never the man who came out. He became this, hard, cold, and angry at the whole world. Like he's trying to punish everyone for the injustice he suffered. So he comes here every week to, what? Flex his misery on us? Simone asked, a mix of pity and resentment churning within her. We think it's about control, Davy said tiredly. He couldn't control the most important thing in his life, so now he controls everything else, down to the temperature of his soup and the exact shade of red in his steak. And we let him, because this restaurant needs his patronage. So, from now on, you do exactly as I said. No eye contact, no witty retorts. You are a machine. Is that understood? Simone nodded, but her mind was reeling. He wasn't just a monster anymore. He was a man hollowed out by grief. It didn't excuse his behavior, but it complicated it. She left the locker room feeling like she was walking on a tightrope. When the impossibly expensive bottle of Montrachet arrived, Simone took it to his table. Her hands were trembling slightly as she presented the label to him. He grunted his approval without looking at her. She expertly uncorked it and poured a small amount for him to taste. He swirled it, sniffed it, and took a sip, holding the wine in his mouth for an unnervingly long time before swallowing. Acceptable, he finally declared. Simone filled his glass and was about to retreat when he spoke again, his voice low and sharp. Waitress, she stopped, her back to him. Yes, sir. Your name, he commanded. Her heart pounded. Davy's word screamed in her head. She was supposed to be anonymous, a ghost. Giving him her name felt like giving him a weapon. She squeezed her eyes shut for a fraction of a second, the faces of her mother and sister flashing in her mind. She turned around slowly to face him. Her own grief, her own struggles, her own fierce need to keep her family safe rose up to meet his cold, empty gaze. She would not cower. It's Simone, sir, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Simone Jones. Kenjiro Tanaka stared at her, his expression unreadable. He gave a slow, deliberate nod, then turned his attention back to the window, dismissing her. As Simone walked away, she felt a profound sense of dread. She had just broken the most important rule. She had given the shark her name, and now she could only wait for the bite. A week passed, long and agonizing. When Tuesday evening rolled around again, the atmosphere in the Azure Orchid was thick with tension. At precisely 7:30 p.m., the Lexus glided to the curb. Martin the host approached Mr. Davies. "He's here," Martin announced, his voice funereal. And he had a request when he made the reservation. He asked for the same table, and the same waitress. He asked for Simone Jones by name. A collective, silent gasp passed through the staff. This was it. A summons. Simone felt her blood run cold. He hadn't forgotten her. He had fixated on her. Davies walked over, his face a mask of grim resignation. "It's you, Jones. He asked for you. Remember what we talked about? Be a machine." Nodding numbly, Simone walked towards table 7. Tanaka was already seated. He watched her approach, his dark eyes tracking her every step. "Good evening, Mr. Tanaka," Simone said, her voice impressively steady. "Jones," he acknowledged. He didn't look at the menu. "I'll start with the seared scallops, but I want them seared for precisely 1 minute on each side. Use a stopwatch if you must. They are to be served on a bed of wilted spinach, but the spinach must not touch the scallops." A clear demarcation. Simone meticulously wrote it down. "And for my main course," he continued, "the duck confit. But I find the cherry sauce you serve it with to be pedestrian. Tell the chef I want an orange and star anise reduction instead. It should be tart, not sweet. If I taste more than a hint of sugar, it will be sent back." Every request was a small assertion of power, a deliberate complication. "Of course, sir," Simone said calmly. "I'll see to it immediately." In the kitchen, Chef Julian flew into a theatrical rage but ultimately relented. "Fine, for you, Simone. We will build him his fence of spinach." Simone met every challenge perfectly. The water was served with exactly 3 lemon wedges and a separate glass of ice. The scallops arrived with a literal gap of white porcelain between them and the spinach. Tanaka inspected it, ate it, and said nothing. The duck confit arrived with a small silver boat of dark, glistening reduction. He tasted a tiny drop, closed his eyes, then opened them. "It's adequate." From Kenjiro Tanaka, adequate was the highest form of praise. A wave of relief so profound washed over Simone that she felt lightheaded. The meal concluded, and he paid the check. After he departed, Simone opened the leather folio to retrieve the restaurant's copy of the slip. She glanced at the tip line and her breath hitched. The bill was for several $100s. On the tip line, where he usually left a standard, almost insulting 20%, he had written in a new number, an amount nearly equal to the cost of the meal itself. It was more money than she made in 2 weeks. Beneath his signature, he had added 2 small, almost illegible words, "for the trouble." The other waiters rushed over. When Simone showed them the slip, there were gasps. "I don't understand," whispered a young waiter. "He never does that." His behavior was deliberately antagonistic, yet the tip was extravagantly generous. It was a contradiction, a puzzle. He had put her through a gauntlet, and in his own strange, transactional way, he had rewarded her for not breaking. The dread she had felt earlier was now replaced by a deep, unsettling curiosity. The massive tip became the new leading story in the folklore of the Azure Orchid. Simone was no longer the lamb for the slaughter, she was the dragon tamer. A new routine began. Every Tuesday, Kenzio Tanaka would arrive and ask for Simone's section. Every week, he would present a new series of bizarre tests. He complained the scent of lilies from the lobby was interfering with his wine. He sent back a lamb chop, claiming it was plated at an unappealing angle. Simone met every challenge with the same stoic professionalism. Their interactions remained clipped and formal. But he always, at the end of the meal, left a tip that was wildly, almost absurdly generous. He would test her resilience, and she would monetize his misery. One Tuesday evening in late autumn, the restaurant was quiet. Tanaka was particularly silent, staring into the rain streaking down the windows. Simone's phone vibrated in her apron. It was her sister, Nia. Excusing herself, she answered in a hushed whisper. "Nia, is everything okay?" "Is it Mom?" "She's okay, Moan, she's fine." Nia's voice came through, thick with emotion. "I just got the estimate from the specialist. The new treatment they're recommending." "Simone, we can't afford it. It's more than you make in a year. The insurance is calling it's experimental and won't cover it." Simone's heart sank. "How much, Nia?" $40,000, Nia whispered, her voice cracking. "And that's just for the first round. What are we going to do?" "Don't worry," Simone said, forcing a strength she didn't feel. "We'll figure it out. We always do." They said their goodbyes, and Simone hung up, her hand shaking. She took a deep, shuddering breath and wiped a stray tear from her cheek. She turned to leave the alcove, and froze. Kenzio Tanaka was standing not 20 feet away, near the entrance to the restrooms. His back was to her, but his posture was rigid. She knew with a sudden, gut-wrenching certainty that he had been there for the entire call. He had heard everything. Embarrassment and fear washed over her? He simply turned and walked back to his table as if he hadn't seen or heard a thing. 2 days later, Simone received a phone call from an unknown number. "May I speak with Simone Jones?" a crisp, professional female voice asked. "My name is Evelyn Reed. I'm a senior partner at the law firm of Reed & Associates. I'm calling you regarding your mother's medical case." Simone was bewildered. "I'm sorry, I haven't contacted any law firm." "I know," Ms. Reed said kindly. "We were contacted by a third party, a benefactor who wishes to remain anonymous. This person has made us aware of your family's situation. The benefactor has arranged and paid for a full consultation for you and a complete review of your mother's case, pro bono, of course." Dumbfounded, Simone agreed to an appointment. An anonymous benefactor? It made no sense. Who would do such a thing? The following Tuesday, she approached Tanaka's table, armed with a secret she wasn't sure how to handle. She'd met with Evelyn Reed, a brilliant lawyer who believed they had a very strong case against the insurance company. A door had opened where there had only been a solid wall. As Tanaka was preparing to leave, he paused, looking not at her, but at a point just past her shoulder. "In this world, Jones," he said, his voice a low rumble, completely out of the blue, "the system is designed to crush the little guy. The rules are incomprehensible for a reason. He finally lifted his gaze to meet hers, his dark eyes holding a depth she had never seen before. When someone offers you good advice, he continued, his voice deliberate, you'd be a fool not to take it. And with that, he stood and walked out, leaving Simone standing in his wake, her heart hammering. It was him. There was no other explanation. Kenjiro Tanaka, the monster of the Azure Orchid, had just given her family a lifeline. The revelation that Kenjiro Tanaka was her anonymous benefactor shattered Simone's perception of him. Consumed by a need to understand, she dedicated her off-hours to a new mission, uncovering the real Kenjiro Tanaka. She dug deep online, pushing past the superficial business profiles and tabloid stories. Her breakthrough came from an obscure legal blog post from over a decade ago, lamenting the failure of a proposed bill called the Okemihana Bill, which aimed to introduce harsher sentences for drunk drivers. The names were a punch to the gut. The article mentioned in passing that the small advocacy group behind the bill had been quietly funded by an anonymous donor. This clue unlocked a hidden history. She found records of a massive grant to a non-profit that provided free legal counsel to families fighting powerful insurance companies. She discovered an endowed scholarship at a university for aspiring public defenders. In every case, the funding came from a mysterious, anonymous source. It was all him. His obsession with control at the restaurant suddenly made perfect, tragic sense. It wasn't about malice, it was a trauma response. His rudeness was a fortress built to keep people at a distance. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place when she found an old society column from before the accident. It featured a photo of a much younger, smiling Kenjiro Tanaka at a charity gala. His wife, Okemi, was radiant on his arm, and holding his hand was a little girl with a missing front tooth, Hana. He hadn't always been a monster. He had been a husband, a father, a happy man. That Tuesday, she approached his table with a newfound sense of purpose. He began his typical litany of requests, but she heard them differently now. When she brought him his tea, she waited for a lull in the dining room's chatter. "Mr. Tanaka," she began, her voice soft but clear. "I was doing some reading the other day about legal advocacy groups, the ones that help families fight for victims' rights." A deep stillness came over him. His hands froze. He was listening intently. "I was just so struck by it," Simone continued, holding his gaze. "The idea that there are people out there working behind the scenes, fighting for strangers they've never even met. They don't do it for recognition. They just see an injustice and try to make it right." She paused. "I just think it's an amazing thing, what some people do to fight for others, especially when no one is watching." The silence that followed was profound. The fortress around Kenjiro Tanaka showed a crack. He cleared his throat, a rough, gravelly sound. "The scallops," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "I think I'll have the seared scallops tonight. Exactly as the chef prepares them." It was a concession. A white flag. The tests were over. Sophia simply nodded, a small, knowing smile on her lips. She had found the truth, and by sharing it so subtly, she had opened the door for the real Kenjiro Tanaka to walk through. The truce declared over the scallops marked a profound shift. His weekly visits transformed from tense trials into quiet, respectful rituals. He began asking Simone's opinion on wine pairings and, to the astonishment of the staff, would actually take her recommendation. Their dynamic had settled into a comfortable peace. The true turning point came when Reed and Associates secured a life-altering victory. With her mother's future care guaranteed, Simone felt an overwhelming gratitude she could no longer contain. That Tuesday, as the restaurant began to empty, she approached his table. "Mr. Tanaka," she began. "I know it was you." He didn't feign ignorance. "Your lawyer is very good. I trust the outcome was satisfactory." "It changed my family's life," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave my mother a future. I don't have the words to thank you." "No thanks are necessary," he said quietly. "The system failed you. I simply provided a tool to level the playing field." "It's more than that," she insisted gently. "I did some research. The Okemihana Bill, the scholarships, the other families. I know the monster everyone fears is just a mask. A shadow of his old pain crossed his face. That reputation keeps the world at arm's length. After I lost my family, the world became noise. Controlling things here was the only way to make it stop. I see the man who endured that, Simone replied, her voice soft with empathy. And the same man saved my mother. For the first time, a genuine, if small, smile touched Kenjio's lips. You were the first person in a decade who wasn't afraid. You didn't see a monster, you saw a rude customer and stood your ground. He paused, his expression turning serious. I have a proposition. All those anonymous charities need someone to run them. Someone with integrity and courage. I'm establishing the Tanaka Foundation, and I want you to be its executive director. Simone was stunned into silence. He was offering her a new life, a path she had never dreamed of. She looked around the elegant dining room, the stage for her fear and her triumph, and knew her time here was over. Yes, she said, her voice clear and certain. I accept. It was not a fairy tale ending, but a new beginning. He was taking a first step out of the shadows, and she was starting a career she couldn't have imagined. The waitress who refused to back down hadn't just earned his respect, she had given him a reason to re-engage with the world. Their story is a powerful reminder that the people we dismiss as monsters are often individuals fighting battles we know nothing about. It shows that courage isn't about the absence of fear, but about standing firm in spite of it. One act of defiance set in motion a chain of events that uncovered a hidden truth and healed two very different lives, proving that empathy is a superpower, and that looking past the surface to truly see the person within can change not only their world, but also our own.